WWE 2K24 is officially here, and it's a game I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I'm coming at it as a complete noob to the series, having never played any of the WWE 2K games. But don't get it twisted, I was a huge wrestling fan growing up, back when kids made fun of me because wrestling was gay and fake. People still clown wrestling for being fake, but so are the movies you watch. It's all just adults playing pretend. You just need to leave your ego at the door and embrace it. Anyways, I spent hundreds of hours playing WWF Smackdown on PS1, Smackdown Shut Your Mouth and Here Comes the Pain on PS2, and my personal favorite, Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 on the Xbox 360. Admittedly, it's been a while since I paid attention to anything in the wrestling world, but that long break made it refreshing to jump back into it with WWE 2K24. In a world where sports games come out yearly with very minuscule changes in each game, I think the long break really helped me embrace and appreciate the newest release in the world of WWE simulation. So what drew me in? For one, I found that this game has way more content than I expected from an annual sports game. I've played over 40 hours and still have tons of content to experience. The mode that shined above all else for me was by far MyRise, being split into two fully fleshed out standalone story modes with the women's story in Unleashed and the men's story in Undisputed. Typically, story modes in sports games are smaller 4 to 6 hour experiences, but I found both of these stories to be upwards of 15 hours each, with multiple choices made throughout that can be replayed to experience different story beats. Unleashed has you starting as the co-founder and wrestler for indie wrestling production TBD, before becoming a mainstay on Monday Night Raw. From there, you go through multiple mandatory and optional storylines that are pretty hit or miss. Some are fun and interesting, and others just make you roll your eyes, like the WWE superstars starting a cult around some breathing app. I just felt like the storyline was for the younger TikTok generation where everyone wants to be an influencer, and it just didn't speak to me as someone who recently turned 30. But when it comes to wrestling, sometimes you need to just embrace the ridiculousness. Overall, I enjoyed the journey throughout Unleashed, but definitely preferred the Undisputed storyline. Not only because I'm a raging misogynist, but because I found my female character to be very unlikable at times the way she was written.
Let's hear it for our host.
I won't say no to a little applause.
Of course you won't. And I absolutely adore the story of how you got the role. Come on, tell everyone.
It is funny how much luck came into play, even with the unbearable weight of my immense talent.
Who knows who would have gotten a career-defining movie role?
Well, I'm sure my stardom was inevitable, but it did speed things along.
I didn't have that feeling in Undisputed. Here, you take the reins of a mediocre superstar, 2 years on Raw and still struggling to prove yourself. From here is a typical rags to riches story. Well, sort of. Some extenuating circumstances leave you as the new undisputed WWE champion, and you spend the rest of the story trying to prove that you deserve it. So I guess a rich to richer story. Being able to fight my way through the WWE superstar roster as my own created character has always been my favorite part of the WWE games. I love putting myself in the shoes of a WWE superstar and working my way to the top of the wrestling world. There are tons of cool moments as well, such as playing as my superstar in WWE 2K24 while I was playing as my superstar in WWE 2K24. And both stories end with a satisfying finale at WrestleMania. But these modes aren't perfect. One of my gripes with WWE 2K24 as a whole has to do with the clunky controls. Certain actions just don't seem to register well, such as trying to pick up a weapon off the ground. There were tons of times where I was in reaching distance of a chair or sledgehammer on the ground and was hitting LB to pick it up, but struggled since I wasn't the perfect distance away facing it in the perfect direction. Other times, like when the animation is playing from a wrestler coming back into the ring, it can cause your superstar to stumble because you tried to grab or strike someone while their animation is playing, causing them to get the upper hand on you, which was incredibly frustrating at times. The clunky controls really show themselves in specific matches. Throughout MyRise, they periodically have the story push you towards their new match types, such as the ambulance or casket match. The first time I found myself frustrated with the game was during an ambulance match versus Rhea Ripley in the MyRise Unleashed story. As a new player who admittedly didn't have the controls down yet, it just felt clunky and unintuitive to get Rhea into the ambulance while she was injured enough that I could close the door. I needed to hit her with a finisher, then grab her, sit her up, grab her again, stand her up, and then pick her up and put her in the ambulance. Not to mention she had the resilience ability that could auto-break her out if you were about to win the button mashing contest. I'm sure veteran players have no issue with this, but as a total noob this was clunky and unintuitive. But the biggest issue I had with MyRise was that a lot of times the game will require you to do very specific things throughout the match to either win the match or to trigger cutscenes to hit certain story beats. For one, I generally dislike when the game forces you to play it a specific way. I want to play my matches the way I want to play, and it's not fun to lose a match because you won it but not the way the game told you to win it. I get that sometimes they want to tell a specific story so they need you to trigger a cutscene, but these situations show the game as completely broken at times. The first time I experienced this was at Survivor Series in the Undisputed story. You have a War Games match where every few minutes a new wrestler is allowed to join. You're the first in the ring and you need to strike Cody Rhodes, who is the last to enter, in the center of one of the rings to trigger a cutscene. I struck Cody so many times in the center of the ring, and the cutscene would not trigger. And then someone on my team would pin one of the opponents and we'd win the match, but I would fail because I didn't trigger the cutscene. This happened over and over and over, and every time I had to sit through 15 minutes of the match before Cody was back in it. I looked at what I was doing wrong and saw that I needed to try to clear out the left ring of my teammates and opponents as well as any weapons that the AI continuously would bring in. And that was pretty difficult in a match with me and 7 other AI. After almost 2 hours of failing a match where I simply needed to trigger a cutscene, I was at my wit's end.
I thought I was throwing over.
This was absolutely infuriating. I was really enjoying the game, and I wanted to keep playing and progressing. But this is just poor game design making this match almost unbeatable, and it's something I hope the developer avoids in future games. I ran into a similar issue in the Supernatural storyline in Unleashed, where I needed to use the Soul Siphon ability in order to trigger a cutscene. I could not get the ability to trigger, and I almost gave up on finishing the story entirely because of it. The prompt would never show up to use Soul Siphon, and again I had to look up how to get it to work. Some people said fill all 3 finisher meters so that you could no longer trigger the rage ability instead, forcing Soul Siphon to trigger. And it took me a while before I realized I needed to be facing a standing opponent in order to use the ability. But the ability took a few seconds to execute and I constantly was interrupted. This jankiness just makes the game feel unpolished. Eventually, after rage quitting, cooling off, and coming back, I was finally able to stun my opponent, grab her, sit her up, grab her, stand her up, and then execute a Soul Siphon. But moments like these really take the wind out of a mostly enjoyable experience. After completing both MyRise stories, I moved on to the Showcase mode. I genuinely loved reliving old WrestleMania matches alongside the integrated cutscenes seamlessly transitioning from the actual match to the 2K24 gameplay. It was cool getting some background on historic WrestleMania matches before my time, and the mode hit my feels extra hard once I got to the matches that I remember actually watching growing up. My only gripe with the mode is that to get the full story, you need to follow the prompts on screen to get the match to play out as it did in real life, and I already expressed my dislike of having to play matches a specific way. But admittedly, the game mode is much better when you do follow the prompts, as you get more integrated cutscenes and dialogue about the match. I mostly ignored these unless it was a specific match I wanted the full story on. For example, the first WrestleMania I remember watching, WrestleMania 20, specifically Eddie Guerrero against Kurt Angle. I read people complaining about the mode only having 21 matches and how the mode was done better in prior games, following specific stars through the WrestleMania matches instead of just being isolated selected matches. Maybe I should go back and play the older Showcase modes, but as someone who has never experienced anything like this, Showcase mode was a total win in my book. Except for that John Cena Firefly Funhouse match. That was obnoxiously long and boring. Really didn't like that one. There are a few other modes, such as My Faction, that the game seems to try funneling you into. I loaded it in and opened all my packs, but it just seemed like a version of FIFA Ultimate Team that's made just to bait you into microtransactions. And I wasn't interested in this sort of live service, so I didn't really give it much of a chance. There was also the return of My GM, which the community seemed to be happy about. This mode gives you a budget and allows you to draft a roster, plan events and matches, curate storylines, and battle the other shows to try to be the most popular entity in WWE. I'm glad that people like this, but it's not something that I'm too interested in. It reminds me of a friend that played Madden but would just do franchise mode where you draft your team and then just simulate all 30 years of the franchise. I'm much more interested in the actual matches. There's also two versions of My Universe. One version is a sandbox mode where you can take control of all the WWE entities, create matches and storylines, play or simulate any or all of the matches, and just do whatever you want. I much preferred the other version of My Universe where you choose a superstar and get to play a more traditional franchise or story mode as that superstar. You can play or simulate their matches, go through rivalries, request championship matches, and just exist in WWE as your favorite WWE superstar. As someone who doesn't know the newer superstars all that well, you know I had to play as Randy Orton. And this mode is probably where I'm going to spend the rest of my time in the future. So WWE 2K24, is it worth your money? If you've been buying WWE 2K games for the last 10 years, I'm not sure this game brings anything new to the table. But the MyRise stories are still 30 hours of new content that are worth experiencing. As I mentioned, I've clocked over 40 hours at this point and still have tons of things I still want to do. 2K24 is surprisingly dense for a yearly sports game, and despite my frustrations with the clunky controls and sometimes unpolished feel, for me it was worth every penny of the $70 price tag. It honestly got me back into wrestling, and I'm catching up on the latest episodes of Smackdown and Raw. And with WrestleMania 40 being in Philly, I might have to make my way down to the link for one of the two nights. Although with the hefty price tag, I might just get a month of Peacock and watch from home. I hope this review was helpful, or at least somewhat entertaining, and if you enjoyed, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Later.
I don't know how good your hearing is, but you got about 15,000 people calling you an asshole. I'ma stomp a mud hole in your ass and walk it dry. I'm gonna open up a big fat can of whoop ass. And that's all I gotta say about that. What? Give me a hell yeah. And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so.